My son's name was DJ. One of the things I remember most vividly about him is the shape of his mouth and nose and face. I remember it so vividly because it's a strong facial feature that he shared with my wife. So every morning when I wake up and I look at her face, I see my son's face.
Welcome to Still a Part of Us, a place where moms and dads share the story of their child who was stillborn or who died in infancy. I'm Winter.
And I'm Lee. We are grateful you joined us today. Please note that this is a story of loss and has triggers.
Thanks to our lost parents who are willing to be vulnerable and share their children with us.
If you're listening to this podcast, just know that on our YouTube channel there are pictures and videos that are related to the stories that are being shared.
Subscribe and share it with a friend that might need it and tell them to subscribe. Why? Because people need to know that even though our babies are no longer with us, they're still a part of us.
Doug, thank you so much for coming on the podcast with us. It's glad that your wife reached out to us and that you're willing to come and talk with us as well. Thank you. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about you and your wife, Amy. How did you guys meet? Where did you guys meet? How long ago was this that you guys met?
Yeah, just past our 11-year meet anniversary. We met at a place here in Philadelphia called Morgan's Pier, which is a outdoor bar that's under the Ben Franklin Bridge right on the Delaware River. It was a night I was there with my friends. I was about to leave. And as I was about to leave, I saw a group come in and I said, hey, maybe I'll stay a few minutes longer. And here we are 11 years later. Well, that's a fortuitous night.
Yeah, it was very serendipitous that you stayed. And what caught you about her, or did she come up to you?
It was, my friends were leaving. I was debating whether to get in the cab, and inside was still fun. There was a DJ dance party, so figured I'd go back in. Saw her and her group of friends on the dance floor from across the bar, and I think we just made eye contact for a little while, and she came over and bought me a PBR. That's the story.
Well, cool. Yeah. So 11 years ago, did you guys hit it straight off the bat? Like, hey, this is my soulmate,
It was, I feel like it was, we were very much attracted to each other at first sight. Things were a little complicated for her more so than me. I was single at the time. She was in a complicated situation, but we hit it off and started dating pretty much immediately, and really haven't left each other's side for too long since then.
Well, good. 11 years ago, things moved pretty quickly for you guys, or where is it like, hey,
a little slower. We dated, there was courtship, there was meeting family. It was, a little more old school in that way. She was still living with her parents after college at home. So we dated, she lived outside the city. I was in the city. And then when she moved into the city, I helped her find a roommate with a bunch of girls. So yeah, we dated for a few years before we finally moved in together and made the plan to, build something more.
Well, good. Oh man, very chivalrous of you. Old school, help her move.
Dates and meeting with parents and finding her a place to live with good people and building a friend group together. All that stuff was important, part of the foundation.
Well, good. And how long, I guess I was going to say, like, are you guys married? Are you engaged? Are you guys like
we're married? Partners? Yeah, we got married in 2018. So 5 years. In October.
In October. Spooky events happening then. Boo-ho-ho.
I was going for optimal weather. I really love that crisp fall, blue sky fall air that you get for about 1 or 2 weeks in September, October.
Yeah, in the Northeast. The fall is my favorite. I'm a big hairy guy, so anything above 60 degrees is hot. So
my goal was to not have it above 70 because I have to wear a suit and I was going to sweat through it. So that was the goal, and I wanted it even later in October. But as a compromise, we got the first week of October.
Yeah. Well, good. And so sweet. We were talking earlier before. You've sort of jumped around career-wise. Maybe not what you wanted, but it seems like you've landed in some cool things. You were a shipbuilder for a while, and now you're into construction and stuff like that. So, yeah,
Yeah,
you're
wouldn't call myself shipbuilder. I was a hull designer in
a
the
whole designer.
engineering department. The
Hey,
shipbuilders, boilermakers would take offense at
yeah,
that.
well, I
I
won't
was
tell.
not allowed to weld anything.
Yeah, well,
But and then now I'm in construction management. Yeah, I'm doing multi-million-dollar commercial development for the most part. Although now my current project is a large residential project. Really cool house.
yeah. So you're the man's man. Besides the Boilermakers, you're the man's man. Well,
I don't
sweet.
claim that. No.
Well, cool. Well, thanks, Doug, for coming again. And yeah, we're excited to get to know you, get to know Amy, and get to know your son, DJ. Let's start in the beginning. Like, were you and Amy planning on having a child, and when you guys conceived? Like, let's start from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Our first step was the engagement. Our second step was buying a house, which we renovated ourselves, and the third step was marriage, and the fourth step was a child. So yeah, there was a clearly defined plan. The renovation ran a little long; took us
Yeah.
3 years to get through the renovation, and we ended up getting married kind of at the halfway point of the renovation. We took a break for about 6 months, had the wedding, and then continued the renovation. So it was really, once we finished the renovation, was the clear line of when we were starting to think about expanding our family. We were ready to fill the house.
Okay.
So yeah, that was in 2020 when she decided to go off birth control, and we decided to start trying.
Not to pry too much. I guess this is a prying podcast, but did you guys have any issues? Was it, first night off? You guys?
Oh, we were unfortunately not so lucky. Unexplained infertility to this day. Although I guess with the successful pregnancy, it's called secondary infertility now. But no, she had been on birth control, for 10 years, so it took a little bit of time for her cycle to normalize after coming
Mhm.
off of that. And once we started tracking her ovulation cycles and really figuring out the timing of it, and started trying, and went a good 8-9 months trying without any success before we
Mhm.
started making phone calls to fertility practices.
Yeah. It's always hard. Winter and I, we've with all three of our pregnancies, we sort of had infertility issues as well. So it's hard. It's when you're wanting it, it's hard. So you guys called. What was the next step? Did you guys just keep trying, or did they get you?
Yeah, so we well, first was just tracking, make
Mm-hmm.
sure we're hitting the ovulation dates, and then it went to IUI. Did 3 cycles of intrauterine inception, and those were unsuccessful. So they recommended a medicated IUI was the next step. First month of medicated, she over responded to the pills and produced too many follicles, so we had to cancel that. And then the following cycle, when they changed the medicine and dosage, was the one where we got pregnant. So it was over a year of trying to get pregnant.
Were you? I'm going to assume that you were pretty happy, pretty excited. Any other feelings? Were you scared? Were you like, oh no?
I mean,
We,
everyone
we,
kept saying, "Are you scared?" And I kept saying, no, it's inevitable, right?
yeah.
The inevitability. Well, that's a sad thing now to have thought that
Mm-hmm.
the pregnancy was inevitable. It was the fatherhood. She's pregnant. I'm going to be a father. It doesn't matter what I think about it.
Yeah.
It is reality. So I was steeling myself for the reality. From I didn't have a ton of experience with children growing up. I have one younger brother. But I was pretty young when he was born. So,
Yeah.
hadn't been around a ton of children growing up, unlike my wife. As the oldest of five, she was essentially a mom.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't know firsthand what to expect, obviously, but had plenty of people, that were there ready to guide me. So it was exciting, very exciting. We're very happy and very excited. We had stressful few years with the renovation and planning a wedding during a renovation, and all of that happening right after I gotten laid off from the shipyard. So we had thought that we were falling into a calmer period where we were going to, get what we wanted and be happy.
Yeah, well, let's start talking about the pregnancy. Was it an easy pregnancy for Amy and you? Was everything going well, like from the beginning?
Surprisingly easy from the beginning. It was so typical and normal. There were no complications, no scares, no, developmentally everything was going. All the markers were happening at the right times, and every appointment was, everything's great,
Everything right.
including the one 8 days before it happened. Yeah. We had our 20-week anatomy scan 8 days before we lost our son.
Now let's get a little bit of a time frame. We're coming up on his first year anniversary, and so you guys were pregnant during the 2022.
Yes, April. I think April was the month we conceived of 2022. So yeah,
so
at that
a little
point
bit of 20.
It was July of 20 when we started, so it was 2 years from starting to getting pregnant.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess this is a drum that we've been beating for a while. This is the tail end of the COVID pandemic. Were there any restrictions at the hospital for you guys as you're going in for appointments? Or
I think it was masks and one visitor by that time.
Okay.
By the tail end.
Yeah,
so it didn't really complicate our treatment in any way.
Did you get to go to most of the appointments? Were you able to?
I went to every appointment. I've missed 2 or 3 appointments out of these 3 years of between the infertility and OBGYN and every other
everything,
maternal fetal medicine. We've had a lot of appointments, and I make it a point to go to all of them.
Very dedicated husband. So
the side benefit of the work from home, giving us as professionals flexibility to do that, has been, very important.
Yeah. Well, good. So let's talk about, you said you had the anatomy scan at 20 weeks.
It was so normal. It was so normal that after the scan was reviewed, the doctor walked in, and the only thing he said to us was, "You'll be our easiest patient all day. Everything's great." And then he walked out the door.
Wow. So you had this outlook of happiness, of joy. Let's continue on from there. What happens?
So that was 8 days before August 19th. We were having our anatomy scan, and then we went in the following week, even on, it was a Wednesday, for just a routine checkup with the OB/GYN. And at that point, Amy was noticing what she was calling low pain. She kept saying he felt low, pain, discomfort, but she hadn't really had the Braxton Hicks yet, so she thought it was, and she and our wasn't an OB/GYN, it was her nurse practitioner, but had agreed that it was probably just the normal Braxton Hicks cramping that she was feeling, because up to that point she hadn't really felt a ton of discomfort. So 2 days before we were seen, but there was no visual inspection. So I think maybe at that point had they looked, they may have noticed that she was dilated even then, but we don't know. So come, that was Wednesday, whatever, Thursday night, I forget the exact dates, whether it was Thursday or Friday, we were to have 5 couples down at our in-laws beach house down in Rehoboth. So we drove down to Rehoboth after the appointment, day after the appointment, and everyone kind of trickled in that night after work, and we had dinner at the house with 10 people, our 5 closest couple friends, and everyone was celebrating Amy and her pregnancy, and it was very, very, very happy. And then the next day everything changed. So the next day we wake up, and Amy, I decided to go for a bike ride, something I do down there often, and she was going to go for a walk around the neighborhood with her girlfriend. About 10 in the morning. So about 11:30 in the morning, I'm halfway into my bike ride, and I get a phone call from Amy saying, "We're at urgent care. Please get off your bike and come pick us up from urgent care and bring us some lunch. We haven't eaten anything yet, and then help us get back home." Okay, wait, you're at urgent care. Why are you at urgent care?
Yeah.
Emma got bit by a dog. Emma was her really good friend that was down with us for the weekend.
okay.
Got bit by a dog. Okay, that's really weird. So got off my bike, loaded it in the car, went and grabbed some breakfast from a bagel shop, went to the urgent care to where they were, and then followed them home in the car. And we get back to the house, and it's just, where Amy took a breath, I took a breath. We just kind of been through a little bit of a whirlwind.
Yeah.
As we're kind of settling in, the house is really, pretty much empty. Everyone's kind of going about their morning routine. And Amy says, I don't feel good. I don't feel right. I said, well, you've just been through a lot, why don't you go? Let's go lay down and, eat something. It's like noon by now. And she lays down and get her to eat a little bit, and things are getting better. She low pain, same thing she was saying on the Wednesday, like low pain, didn't feel right. Went in to pee, nothing, came back, laid down for a few more minutes. This is probably 5, 10, 15 minutes at this point. And we're laying down, just trying to calm her down, breathe and stroke her hair and, calm down. You just went through something pretty stressful. Just calm down. And she gets up to go to the bathroom again. And the second time she went to the bathroom, there was blood in her pee, a little bit of blood in her urine. So she came out and told me that she saw blood, and I said, we have to go somewhere right now. Yeah. I don't know what we're going to do, but we have to go somewhere. So we come out of the room, and she puts on we had been wearing bathing suits. We were about to go to the pool with our friends.
Yeah.
So we come out, and we saw our one friend, Ariel, and we said, "Hey, something's wrong. We got to go." And we left. So walking out of the door, I don't know where I'm going, right? So we get in the car. I called, first thing I did was call 911 as I backed up out of the driveway. I said, "Hey, a pregnant wife is not feeling, feels wrong. What should we do?" They said, "You have two options. You can drive to the hospital, which is about 20 minutes away, or you can pull over to the side of the road and wait for an ambulance." And they said, "Well, we are not allowed to recommend a course of action. You have to choose yourself." Yeah. And I said, "Well, I don't see the point of waiting for an ambulance if I can be at the hospital in 15 minutes. Yeah. So hung up with 911, driving. There's traffic, short traffic, but a normal drive would have been 15 minutes. We were looking at about a half an hour drive in traffic, really freaking out, trying to I wanted to just drive down the middle of the road with my hazards on. So I'm driving. We decided to call her mother for advice after 911. Talked to her mother a little bit. Nothing really to tell her. It was discomfort at that point. Yeah. Scary discomfort, though, like building discomfort. And her mom, just told us to go to the hospital. So that's, what we did.
Now, can I ask a question?
Yes.
This town that you're at, is it a big town? Is it going to be a big hospital, or is it going to be a country doctor?
Yeah. Well, Rehoboth is a beach town, so it's a vacation town. There are several hospitals nearby. We asked on the 911 call the two hospitals they recommended. One was down in Bethany. One was at Beebe, which is in Lewis. So she said, neither one has a NICU, but those are your two options. Because we were thinking of going to urgent care. I thought this was stomach, something with her stomach, we don't know what it is, but it's urgent care. And then after 911 and her mom, it was like, no, we're going to the hospital. And her mom recommended calling ahead to the hospital. So we got off the phone with her mom and we called ahead to BB, and they said, "We're coming in and this is what's going on, and be ready for us."
Okay.
So there are so many things that I know now that I didn't know then. We didn't even get to the part in the baby books about labor. We
Yeah.
did not know that's what was happening.
Yeah. So you're driving, traffic's holding you up a little bit. What's going
Super
through?
scary. There's just
Yeah.
like nothing you could do, right? Like
Yeah.
you just want to hit the gas and go. But no, I mean, it was 20, 30 minutes and checking in with her and holding her hand. How you doing? So we got to the hospital, walking to the admission nurse, and they were waiting for her. They put her in a wheelchair and brought her straight upstairs
Mm-hmm.
to labor and delivery. And I stayed in and did her paperwork for about 15 minutes, admission paperwork. And then I was able to go up. They took me up in an elevator, and I get off the elevator and make my first right. And I'll never forget the room. They call it the Harry Potter room. It was like a closet.
Oh.
It was not a room. It was like
Yeah.
a third of a room. And it was like, I guess they were full and they didn't have anywhere to put us. So they put us in the first room that was available. And it seemed kind of like a closet, like an afterthought. So we're in there and we don't know what's going on. Like, sorry about cursing.
I'll bleep it out.
Okay, I apologize. We don't know what's going on. Lots of nurses in and out. The first 45 minutes were such a blur. That's how long it took to realize she was in labor. It took them about an hour to realize she was actually in labor, as opposed to, is it appendix, gallbladder? They're putting a heart rate monitor on her and one on the baby, and the one on the baby keeps sliding off, but his heart rate was 155 the entire day. His heart rate never changed. Our baby was alive and strong. He was healthy. Something made her go into labor, and we don't know what that is.
She was 21 weeks pregnant at this time, right?
21 and 6.
And
yeah,
6 days.
21 weeks, 6 days, one day shy of 22.
Yeah.
So we're in there, and all hell's broken loose, and everyone's crawling all over in this tiny room. There's 5 doctors. OBGYN came in once or twice on the staff, OBGYN, but we were mostly dealing with the nurses, and the head nurse, Ashley, was a godsend. I'm not a religious person, but she was there for us in a way that we needed, in a time that we needed, in a way that seems beyond coincidence. Like, she was a 10-year traveling NICU nurse at a hospital that didn't have a NICU.
Yeah. And
she was probably one of the first people that recognized what was happening. And an hour after, jumping around a little bit, but it took them an hour. They were saying if the only thing they could do for her was set an IV and get her hydrated, because that's all that they could do to slow the progression of labor. And it was 45 minutes before they even got the IV set. They had trouble setting her IV. So that chaos of, like, they're taking all these measurements, they're trying to figure out what's going on. They're talking to us, they're talking to her, they're talking to each other. It's almost an hour before we realized, like when they finally checked her, it all happened around that 45-minute mark. When they finally got the IV set, they checked her. She was 2 centimeters already and like 80% pace. And at that point, the nurse like held her hand and said, "This is it. Like, this is gonna happen." So we got there at about 1. By about 2:30. I heard that, but I don't know if anyone could truly understand the meaning of that when you hear that. Like, my baby's coming right now, and he's not going to live. Like, they said very quickly after they noted that we were in labor, they said that we do not resuscitate before 24 weeks. So we were, we're in this little room, and doctors buzzing all around, and she continues to dilate, and they're talking about medical transport on a helicopter to either Christiana or CHOP. So they were on the call. The OB on call was on the phone with Christiana's maternal fetal medicine department for hours, back and forth, but she was never stable. So they would not consider transporting her because she was never stable. So we were in that room for like 2 hours before they moved us to a full-size room. At this point, she's in full-on labor. She's having contractions regular. excruciating, painful contractions. Once we got into that room and they started to get us settled in, they started talking about pain relief, pain management. It's only then, just weird how it happened. No one was offering her any kind of pain relief in the early parts, but once we got into that room, it was, they put her in the 20-degree down position to relieve pressure from her cervix in hopes of slowing her rate of dilation. I don't. Maybe there was still a small hope that they were trying to present us that this wasn't going to happen today, but it could maybe be withheld a few days. Like, I don't know. It was just kind of a blur at that point. Lots of doctors in and out, and me alternating between states of trying to keep her calm and be there for her, and just
trying to grasp the situation for yourself. Yeah.
Was so devastated. Like, it was, my brain was breaking in real time. Like, I didn't know how to process what was going on. And I mean, the entire day lasted us from her first symptoms until he was born was 6 hours. And for 4 of those hours, I look back on it now, like, should I have taken her myself in my car and driven to Christiana? It's an absurd thought. There's a lot of absurd thoughts that come from a situation like this, but her father, who works in Delaware, we got a call into him, and he was there by about 5 o'clock. He was there, and pushing the doctors very hard as I think you can push to do something more than they were doing, because it felt like there's nothing they could do. Right? There's nothing they could do. They don't have a NICU. While they're tending to her in labor. That was it. So, we're in that room for maybe 4 to 5 an hour, and it's just me and her at this point. At some point they leave, and you get them when you need them, right? So it was just her and I, and I'm stroking her hair and rubbing her shoulders and watching her go through these ripping, painful contractions, and then her water broke. So it was just me and her in the room, and I run out to get a doctor. And they came in. It was about 6, because it was about an hour from the time her water broke until he came. Again, his heart rate was. We had them take the monitor off somewhere while we were in that room, 4 or 5 p.m. They were like, "There's no point in monitoring his heart rate anymore." I think I don't think we needed to know the moment when he passed, but I'm pretty certain that after, in that hour between her water breaking and him being delivered, the process of delivery, he passed. And it was, just sitting there and holding her shoulder, and, she asked me to hold her leg when it was time for her to start pushing. And I saw him come out. He was still in the amniotic sac. They quickly, took him and cut the cord and brought him over to the table and did their check on him. And it was the next 2 hours after that are kind of a blur, but between 7 and 9:30, I think there was a lot going on with pushing out the placenta physically, which was a very painful process. And then I remember at one point they were talking about giving her a catheter, because we were 7 hours, 8 hours, 9 hours into our day, and she hadn't gotten up to go to the bathroom. So as soon as they started talking about that, she actually just let loose right there on the table. It was almost like comic relief. She peed for like 3 minutes. She just all right on the table, and she was like, "Here it comes." I was like, "There it is." And there's no humility at that point. It's just it was.
Now, Doug, you mentioned earlier that you had even gotten to that point in the birthing books and the birthing classes. Had you ever talked about what your plan was? Did you want to cut the umbilical cord?
Well, we had no, we were both, we each had our own books and we are following along week by week, and we'd skip
Hmm.
ahead a little bit, and we were not that far.
Yeah.
We were still struggling with names. We weren't even, we were talking about setting up a nursery. That's probably
Yeah.
about the
That's
stage we
about
were
it.
at. I'm so glad we never got around to setting up a nursery,
Yeah.
because then I didn't have to come home and take him down.
Yeah.
But no, we were. It really started to hit right in that 20th week about how pregnant we were. She really did start to get bigger, and
Yeah.
I felt him move a couple times during that week leading up to what happened. And we'd sit on the couch on a Saturday morning, and I'd like to play music on a Saturday morning while we're doing chores, and played a Black Sabbath album for him, so we got to hear some good rock and roll.
Was the staff, they they seemed to be very attentive, but were they helping you as well to maybe understand?
I don't
Was
think they
all
were
focus
really
on?
prepared for what happened that day.
Yeah.
As a hospital, I don't
Yeah.
think they were prepared. We had the nurse Ashley and Chloe, her assistant, who were so gracious to us as human beings, and that alone was a huge help. And that was just their life experience that really
Hmm.
I don't every focus was on Amy, obviously, rightly so.
Yeah.
She was the one in preterm labor. No, I don't feel like anyone paid too much attention to me particularly, because the
Yeah.
focus was so
The
entirely on
focus
her.
was, yeah. Yeah. And as a father who's gone through this as well, I feel sorry for you, but also that it's good that they were focusing on Amy and your son. It's devastating. So
Yeah, if you had told me at some point in my life that I would be sitting in a room with my dead child for 24 hours, it's not a thought that had
no,
ever crossed my mind.
no,
Um, when they brought him over to her, I was terrified to look. I did
oh,
not want to look. And it was really difficult for me. And it took me hours in the room to accept what
yeah,
had happened and to be comfortable enough to look at him, let alone hold him, which eventually, by the time all the nurses and all the testing and all the placenta was done and we were alone with our son, it was midnight or 1 in the morning. And I put him in a little cradle next to her, a little plastic bin, really. And we tried to sleep a few hours, and then we woke up and held and cuddled with our son for a few hours in the morning. Um, yeah, I didn't know that was a possibility.
hmm, yeah. It's you never imagine something like this in your life as you're planning a life of your child. When you get the good news that you're pregnant, you always think about what you're going to teach your child, what you're going to do with your child, and you know dances with them, and you never fathom this possibility. How did you come up with the name DJ? How did you guys choose that name for him?
The funniest thing about it is really that they kept asking his name, and we think, okay, what, they really want to know his name. No, you can't get discharged from a hospital until you've named your child, because
Yeah,
there needs to be something on all the
on a
paperwork
record.
for a
Yeah.
name. So we had no name. We were struggling with a name. We had a naming strategy, is what we had, which was, I'm Douglas James DJ. Um, my father is Daniel James DJ. His uncle was David James DJ. So there's a signet ring that comes from
Hmm.
David James. It's 2 generations old. It's DJ. Um, so I wanted a DJ first 2 initials for my son. And that's as far as we got. And we didn't want to force a name on him. We wanted to give him the name that we had for him already, which is what we had been calling him,
Yeah.
DJ.
DJ. It's a beautiful legacy of all of you. Strong familial ties that tether you all together throughout eternity. So you wake up the next day. You're able to. Were you able to sleep? I'm sure it was not the most restful sleep for you both.
So surreal. The next weeks are surreal. Like
Yeah.
you wake up and you're like, "This is a dream, right? This is a
Yeah.
horrible
This
dream."
is a
And then
horrible
you look
dream.
around and you're in a labor and delivery room, which is not a NICU.
Mm,
There were live births that night, like while we tried to sleep. You hear a woman screaming for an hour in the middle of the night, and then a baby, and then you hear the dads and brothers come up, and
patting
people
each
going
other
out
on
for
the back.
cigars and making phone calls. Like that's what happened all night while we were that whole time we were there. There were babies being born. So waking up was so surreal, and then I look across the room, and there's my baby's body right there. So that's all the proof that I needed that it was real.
Yeah.
We probably woke up around 7 a.m. after a couple hours of not sleeping, and then it was really a lot of paperwork and getting to the naming point. And pretty much as soon as we named him, they were able to finish our paperwork, and we were discharged by about 1 noon, between noon and 1 p.m. So I think we were 24 hours total in the hospital.
Yeah. You have no clue what to do. No parent has any idea what to do when they're in that situation. Did you and Amy do? You mentioned just holding your son and being there with your wife and being a family for a moment. Was there anything that you did or chose to do?
We, I got on the bed with her and lay down next to her with my son. We just laid there, held him, and told him that we loved him. And yeah, it was the hardest thing I'll ever do, I think. I don't know. I hope it doesn't happen again, but it's the hardest thing that I've ever had to do to this point. To He was our hope, right? He was our little baby, and we were holding his body,
Mm.
little tiny little body.
Almost 22 weeks. He's a little guy.
He was so tiny. We have hand and footprints from him, and they give a little box that is a donation box that was like hand knitted things that the people from the local nursing homes knit for this situation. So
Mm.
a tiny little preemie cap and but a tiny little Pampers preemie diaper that it looks like it should be for a plastic doll. It's so
Yeah.
tiny. His entire hand was like the size of my thumb. He's so tiny. He was 11 and a half inches and 16 ounces. I think by weight he was tracking maybe a few days more than 21.6. He might have been tracking at about like 22, 1 or 2 days. He was big for how little he was,
Yeah.
but he
Yeah.
was like this perfect little human. He had little black hairs on his head, and his Amy's mother says that he had perfect feet like Doug. He had pretty little long skinny toes and long skinny fingers. His feet and hands look like mine. His nose looked like mine.
Perfect little boy. Beautiful, beautiful, perfect little boy. They were able to finish the paperwork, and did you guys choose? They wanted us to choose a mortuary. Were they wanting you guys to choose a mortuary for your son, or?
We were lucky in that they partnered for this situation. Lucky, a horrible choice
Yeah.
of word.
Yeah.
That was one less decision we had to make. They
Mm-hmm.
have a local partnership with a funeral parlor
Mm-hmm.
right next door, essentially. And they provide services free in situations of infant loss.
Yeah.
So we decided for cremation, we didn't want an autopsy. We had done genetic testing of ourselves and of him early in the
Mm-hmm.
pregnancy. We knew he was not the cause of this. He
Yeah.
was a perfect child. He was his heart rate was strong the entire day. We didn't feel the need to go through with an autopsy, so uh, they remanded his remains almost immediately, I believe, for cremation.
Mm. You guys are away from home. Did you guys head back to the beach house that you guys were at, or did you
So
pack up
weird.
and
It was like
yeah?
so surreal. The night of, we were making a few phone calls, just said, called a few people at the house and said, "Hey, this is what's going on." And
Hmm.
Amy's, I think, mom went back to the house and helped them pack out and leave, so that when we got there the next morning, it was just us.
Yeah.
Or afternoon. So we came back to the house, and her mom and dad stayed and went shopping and got us some food. I think they stayed with us that first night, but I don't remember. But after that, they left, and it was just me and Amy in this big, giant, empty house for. We stayed there for a week because we needed. There's a lot that we needed to do
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
far as dealing with the remains and or having follow up appointments, and
Hmm.
it's just a lot of weird paperwork that you don't think about
No.
that
No.
exists.
Yeah. Were you guys able to get the remains of your son back pretty soon from the mortuary?
Yeah, they actually 4 or 5 days before we even left at the end of that week, we had him. That's DJ. That's me and Amy and DJ. And his remains are in that little box right there.
Beautiful wooden box.
It was surreal. You walk in and they say, condolences. I'm sorry that this situation is what brought us together, and they hand you a plastic bag, and it was 3 tablespoons
Mm.
of ash. It's very small body.
Something that has so much weight in your life. The physical form is so small, but it has such a lasting imprint on you. It's a beautiful urn that you have for him back there. I see nice warm wood. So,
Thank you. Yeah, we did a eventually we this happened August 19th. By it was October that we took a trip. We took several trips, really, extended several trips, but we found that on one of our trips we went up to the Rockies in Canada,
oh, okay.
Jasper, Lake Louise. Really, I find for me personally with hiking in my life, it's nature is the solitude and beauty and grandeur of nature can
Yeah.
be healing on its own.
Hmm. So you and Amy are at the house for a weekish, and then
Yeah, we
how do
spent
you,
a week, and I don't. It's
yeah,
so
it's a foggy dream. It's a bad
yeah.
foggy dream.
It's like you
And
don't know if it's day or night.
yeah,
Every morning you wake up, or every night, whenever you wake up, you're wishing that you
yeah,
weren't awake, that it didn't happen.
yeah,
It's just the days bleed together, the phone calls bleed together. It's she had all the physical wounds of having given birth.
hmm,
Her milk came in on day 2.
hmm,
Uh, Incredibly painful for her.
yeah,
She suffered physically greatly. Uh, yeah, it was a hard week.
yeah. And you head back to your own house. What was that like? How was that like? Leaving the hospital to go to the beach house, then leaving the beach house to go home. Was it just a whole new foggy dream, or was there a little bit more resemblance to my life that I have to put back and carry with me?
It just feels so surreal, right? Like getting out of the hospital in the bright light of day and everyone just going about their business. And then, we had the house to go to, which was a blessing and a curse because it was
Hmm.
supposed to be a place of joy. And now it holds this dark trauma for us. And when we leave there, we felt it was nice to be there, but also horrible. It's good. We had anonymity. We didn't have to talk to anyone.
Hmm.
Even going out for food or general tasks was so hard. Um,
Yeah.
and then the fear of like going back to life, like your daily routine involves so much that when you're in that level of grief, that
Yeah.
just not prepared for it.
Yeah.
So coming home was multi-tiered traumatic. It was, leaving that place. It was coming back to this house that we built for him. Like,
Mhm.
it was all of the reality that we now have to tell everyone what happened to us
Yeah.
and live it now. Like, yeah, it's not good.
Yeah. As you were saying, like you walk out and everybody is oblivious to the pain that you have. And here's all these people just living life like there's there's nothing wrong, but there is something to you that is just the worst thing that has ever happened. And having to function, having to survive is so hard sometimes. So hard. I'm sorry. It sucks.
And it makes it one of the first realizations that I had, even still in the hospital, was, you got to give people grace. You don't know
Hmm.
what anyone is going through.
Yeah.
You drive down the street and honk at someone, you don't know what anyone's lived experience is.
Hmm.
And
Even though they're a crappy driver, you do need to give them grace. Yeah.
I am a little guilty of being an aggressive driver, but I that moment specifically, and then while we were, even before we were discharged, almost like 4 or 5 of the nurses on that floor came in to relate their firsthand experience they had with child loss, whether it be
Oh.
the bereavement nurse who had lost a baby at 40 weeks,
Mm.
Ashley, our the primary
Yeah.
nurse with all the NICU experience. The reason she did what she did was because her sister had lost twins at 26 weeks.
Mm.
And that is what made her want to specialize in fetal medicine. So, like, hearing such compassion from people, but then realizing that this impacts people,
Yeah.
many women, and it's not talked about at all in
No.
society. And most men, I mean, if you told your average man that 1 in 4 pregnancies doesn't result in a live birth, they'd be like, wait, what? Because
Yeah.
you're drilled into your head from the time you're a kid that every time you have sex, you're going to have a kid. Um,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not the case. It's a very complicated process with a lot of risk for the woman. And, in our country, it's really kind of gotten to a sad state of affairs where maternal health and well being is far below most industrialized nations.
Yeah. Yeah. The fact that A, it's not talked about, B, it's not recognized, and C, it's as a nation we are struggling. It's extremely sad. And as men and as fathers and as husbands who've experienced loss, it's hard to share because my son is is extremely sacred to me. His life, his impact on me is something that is paramount to who I am now. Who I was before and who I am now are different people. And I I love to talk about my son. And I'm sure I have friends who don't want to hear about my son because there's that, like, death is morose. It's nobody wants to talk about death. But my son is alive in me. Though he has passed away, he is alive, and he has given me joy and happiness and love. As a man, as a father, as a husband, I'm grateful for my son, though I never got to spend a living moment with him. How has this last year been for you, Doug? These last couple of months, the first couple of weeks and months is just it's a haze, it's a fog, it's dark.
I really experienced the trauma, the grief, the traumatic grief,
Hmm.
like physically. It's like a part of my brain was actually damaged.
Yeah.
It affects my memory. my recall is not there like it was. The fog is lifting over time, but in the immediate aftermath, cohesive thought was difficult. Like, it's hard to have a logical conversation with someone because I can't follow along. It was so debilitating that lucky we have FMLA in this country, and I was able to take some time because my paternity leave was through work would have been in 2 weeks. But with FMLA, I was able to take my 3 months, and it barely scratched the surface of what I needed. The first day back to work, I'll never forget, was just insane. It was like, what? Like, I don't care about any of this. None of this matters.
It's a good thing and a bad thing. Like, a lot of the dross falls away from life, but then there's also like I don't care. Like, I don't care about certain things, and it could be problematic if it's a problem.
So there's two edges to that sword, right? There are certain people. In fact, I have an executive in my company who I report to who lost a child 20 years ago at 22 weeks, which is remarkable to have that level of empathy from a senior leadership position. Like, it's been crucial to have that understanding, because without it, construction is not a touchy-feely, sensitive place. So having that, being able to have a forthright conversation with someone who knows exactly what I'm going through has been so critical. And the way he dealt with his loss was the opposite of me. I could say, this multi-million-dollar contract, though very important, is not life or death. Whereas he, in order to deal with his grief, dove headfirst into work and worked 80 hours a week, So there are different responses for different people. For me, it was a huge shift in my worldview about what's important and what's not. And I've always defined myself by professional success, maybe not success, but I pride myself in doing a good job and producing good work. And I still do, but it's I'm not going to sacrifice my own well-being in the future, or my family dynamics well-being, for the stresses of making money.
It's not your key defining attribute anymore. 1 year out, what would you like to say about your son now?
Really miss him. I wish, we have my sister-in-laws, my wife's sisters, both they were all pregnant at the same time. So there are 2 of the 3 babies are alive. And whenever I see my little nephew, it's amazing and amazingly difficult at the same time. In fact, for the first month, I had trouble meeting him at all. I didn't want to acknowledge that because he was born 3 weeks after DJ's due date. So they would have been Irish cousins, as close to siblings as cousins could be. And it's so hard for me to look at and care for these babies and love them as much as I do, but that ache is there. My boy should be here with them. So that loss is felt every day, and continued infertility does not help with that. We've continued through trying to get pregnant for the past, I think we're on 8 months at this point that we've been trying to get pregnant, and still not being successful. So having family and friends having babies all around, which normally is a positive, that's community building, that's family building. We didn't get to have our part of that. And inextricably, one of the weirdest side effects, like you were saying, is you want to talk about your son. That's how your words give him life and fulfill your meaning. But so many people don't engage with it. Like, don't bring it up. Don't ask us. The people that had successful pregnancies that were, obviously being a new mother is all consuming, right? We lose time for people when we become new parents, but to us, we almost feel a little left behind,
Yeah.
left out.
You feel slightly ostracized.
I mean, it is a really hard thing to accept, and we're still in the thick of the grief, right? So that wherever we go, that grief is with us. And I don't know that everyone, I don't think culturally, societally, we do a good job of preparing people for how to emote with each other through
Mm-hmm.
such intense grief. Our
Yeah.
culture, that's not what our culture is about. We want to move on and the next shiny, bright thing that makes us happy, not deal with tragedies as people who go through tragedy really do need the support of their social network.
Yeah. It is so true. And we need support our whole lives, because our children they will be with us our whole lives. I'm glad that you came and told DJ's story. He's a beautiful little boy. He's well loved by his parents. It is a tragedy, but it's something that will shape you. With your love for him, will shape you into a better man every day, every month, every year. So thank you, Doug.
Really.